October 14th, 1943. Anzio beachhead, Italy. Obergefreiter Klaus Brenner squinted through the periscope of his Panzer IV as the morning mist lifted from the Mediterranean coastline. What he saw emerging from the haze made him laugh out loud, startling his gunner in the cramped turret beside him. 30 meters away, a squat American tank rolled forward on narrow tracks, its vertical armor plates gleaming dully in the autumn sun. The machine looked more like a mobile pillbox than a proper fighting vehicle, its tall silhouette and straight lines defying every principle of German tank design. Brenner keyed his radio with barely contained amusement. "This is what the Americans send to fight the Wehrmacht," he transmitted to his platoon commander. "These tin cans on wheels. They look like moving barns painted green." The laughter that crackled back through his headphones was shared by tank crews across the German defensive line. Here was the legendary American Sherman tank, the weapon that was supposed to challenge German armor supremacy in Europe. To veteran panzer crews who had perfected their craft in Poland, France, and Russia, the M4 Sherman appeared laughably inadequate. Its armor seemed paper-thin. Its gun looked undersized. Its design philosophy appeared fundamentally flawed. What Brenner and his comrades could not have imagined was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon that would systematically overwhelm German armored forces through sheer industrial might and tactical flexibility. Within 18 months, these supposedly inferior American tanks would flood European battlefields in numbers that made German resistance mathematically impossible. The Sherman that drew mockery in October 1943 would become the instrument of Germany's mechanical destruction, not through superior individual performance, but through an avalanche of production that buried German panzer divisions under weight of numbers they could never match. The story of how America's most criticized tank became Germany's greatest nightmare begins not with brilliant engineering or tactical innovation, but with a cold calculation of industrial capacity versus battlefield requirements. The Sherman represented everything German tank designers had rejected, yet it embodied everything American industry could deliver in quantities that would reshape the entire war. Among the German crews positioned along the Anzio perimeter that October morning were veterans who had witnessed the evolution of armored warfare from its earliest days. They had fought in Panzer IIIs across the plains of Poland, upgraded to Panzer IVs for the conquest of France, and refined their tactics during 3 years of brutal combat on the Eastern Front. These men understood tank warfare with an intimacy born of survival. They knew which angles provided protection, which ranges favored their guns, which terrain offered advantages. They had developed doctrine based on quality over quantity, individual superiority over mass production, technical excellence over industrial brute force. The Sherman violated every principle they held sacred. The American tank that rolled toward German positions that morning had emerged from requirements established in August 1940, when the United States Army finally acknowledged that modern warfare demanded more than the light tanks that had comprised America's entire armored inventory. The specifications called for a medium tank weighing no more than 30 tons, armed with a 75mm gun, protected by armor sufficient to stop anti-tank weapons, and reliable enough for mass production by factories that had never built military vehicles. What American designers created was the antithesis of German tank philosophy. Where German engineers pursued technological perfection, American designers emphasized mechanical reliability. Where German doctrine favored heavy armor and powerful guns, American requirements prioritized mobility and maintainability. Where German production focused on quality control and precision manufacturing, American factories were designed for speed and volume. The M4 Sherman that resulted from these choices weighed 33 tons when fully loaded, carried a crew of 5 men, and mounted a 75mm M3 gun that German tankers considered barely adequate for infantry support. Its maximum armor thickness of 76mm seemed pathetic compared to the 100mm frontal protection of later German tanks. Its gasoline engine represented a fire hazard that German diesel-powered vehicles avoided. Its high silhouette made it an easy target for anti-tank guns positioned in defensive positions. Every specification appeared to confirm German assumptions about American industrial incompetence. But the specifications told only part of the story. The complete picture would emerge only when German intelligence began analyzing American production capacity and deployment schedules. The first disturbing reports reached German Army High Command in November 1943. American factories were producing Sherman tanks at rates that exceeded German estimates by orders of magnitude. The Detroit Arsenal tank plant was completing one Sherman every hour around the clock. The Chrysler Tank Arsenal was matching that pace with additional variants. Fisher Tank Arsenal, Pressed Steel Car Company, Baldwin Locomotive Works, American Locomotive Company, and Pullman Standard were all contributing to production totals that defied comprehension. German planners who had calculated American industrial capacity based on peacetime automobile production discovered they had underestimated by factors of 10 or more. The Ford River Rouge complex alone could produce more tanks per month than all German manufacturers combined. General Motors was converting truck plants to tank production with efficiency that German observers found impossible to believe. Chrysler had built entirely new facilities from farmland to finished tanks in less than 18 months, achieving production rates that exceeded established German factories. The mathematics were staggering and undeniable. By December 1943, American factories had produced over 20,000 Sherman tanks, with production accelerating every month. German tank production for the entire war had not yet reached 8,000 vehicles across all types. The ratio was approaching 3-to-1 in America's favor, and the gap was widening with every passing week. German intelligence officers reviewing these figures initially dismissed them as Allied propaganda. No industrial system could sustain such production rates while maintaining quality control. No military could deploy and maintain such numbers of complex mechanical systems across global theaters of operation. No army could train sufficient crews to operate thousands of tanks simultaneously. Every assumption proved wrong. American training programs were graduating tank crews at rates exceeding German estimates. American logistics networks were deploying completed tanks to combat zones within weeks of factory completion. American maintenance systems were keeping operational readiness rates above 70% across all theaters simultaneously. The industrial capacity that had seemed impossible was not only real but accelerating. Lieutenant Colonel Hermann Balck, commanding a panzer regiment on the Italian front, encountered the reality of American production in January 1944 during fighting around Monte Battaglia. His unit had destroyed 6 Sherman tanks in a single engagement, achieving the kind of tactical success that German doctrine emphasized. The crew efficiency was exceptional. The gunnery was precise. The tactical coordination was flawless. By any measure of individual combat effectiveness, the German tanks had proven their superiority. Then, the next morning, 18 replacement Shermans arrived to continue the assault. Balck's regiment had taken 2 weeks to replace their single tank lost in the engagement. The Americans had replaced their losses overnight with tanks that showed no signs of hasty production or poor quality control. The mechanical systems functioned perfectly. The crews demonstrated competent training. The tactical employment showed steady improvement. Most disturbing of all, radio intercepts revealed that these 18 replacement tanks represented a tiny fraction of American tank strength in Italy. Hundreds more were positioned in reserve, with additional hundreds being transported from depots across the Mediterranean. The scale of American armor deployment exceeded every German estimate and continued growing with each convoy that reached Italian ports. February 1944 brought reports from other fronts that confirmed the pattern. In the Pacific, American Sherman tanks were overwhelming Japanese positions through concentrated firepower and numerical superiority. On the Eastern Front, Lend-Lease Shermans were supplementing Soviet tank production with thousands of additional vehicles. In England, massive tank parks were visible from aerial reconnaissance, suggesting preparations for invasion on a scale that required industrial capacity beyond German comprehension. The Sherman tank that had drawn mockery 6 months earlier was revealing itself as the physical manifestation of American industrial supremacy, a weapon designed not for individual excellence, but for overwhelming numerical advantage achieved through production methods that German industry could never match. The full implications of American tank production became clear to German commanders during the preparation for Operation Overlord. Aerial reconnaissance photographs of British staging areas revealed tank concentrations that exceeded the total German armoured inventory for the entire Western Front. Intelligence estimates counted over 3,000 Sherman tanks positioned across England, with additional thousands arriving weekly aboard Liberty ships that docked at ports from Liverpool to Portsmouth. Each convoy brought not just tanks, but complete logistical systems, spare parts inventories sufficient to maintain operations for months, ammunition stockpiles measured in millions of rounds, and fuel reserves calculated to support sustained offensive operations across continental Europe. German tank commanders studying these intelligence reports faced a mathematical reality that tactical skill could not overcome. Even if German crews achieved kill ratios of 3-1, which represented optimistic projections based on previous combat, American numerical superiority would still prove decisive. The arithmetic was inexorable. 3,000 American tanks could absorb 1,000 German kills and still field 2,000 operational vehicles. German tank production for the entire year of 1944 would not reach 1,000 vehicles across all types combined. The Americans were deploying reserves larger than Germany's total production capacity, while maintaining full-strength units across multiple theaters simultaneously. Major General Friedrich von Mellenthin, serving as Chief of Staff to Army Group G, received reports in March 1944 that fundamentally altered German defensive planning. American Sherman production had exceeded 30,000 vehicles, with no decline in manufacturing rates visible from intelligence assessments. Quality control appeared to be improving rather than degrading despite the massive production volume. Mechanical reliability rates were increasing as manufacturing experience accumulated. Most significantly, American crews were demonstrating tactical competence that improved with each engagement, suggesting training programs that could produce skilled operators as rapidly as factories produced tanks. The implications extended beyond simple numerical comparisons. German panzer divisions typically fielded between 100 and 150 tanks when at full strength, though combat losses and maintenance requirements meant actual operational strength rarely exceeded 100 vehicles. American armored divisions deployed with over 200 tanks as standard equipment, but unlike German units, American formations could maintain near maximum strength through continuous replacement of battle losses. When a German tank was destroyed, the crew casualties and vehicle loss represented permanent reduction in combat capability. When an American tank was destroyed, replacement vehicles and trained crews arrived within days or weeks, maintaining unit strength indefinitely. The contrast in logistical philosophy reflected fundamental differences in industrial approach. German tank production emphasized precision manufacturing, complex mechanical systems, and technological advancement that required skilled technicians for maintenance and repair. Each German tank represented hundreds of hours of specialized labor using materials that were increasingly scarce as the war progressed. Component standardization was limited, meaning spare parts inventory required extensive variety. Maintenance demanded technical expertise that took months to develop. The result was tanks with exceptional individual performance that could not be replaced when lost and could not be maintained without extensive support infrastructure. American Sherman production represented the opposite philosophy applied to military manufacturing. Standardized components reduced spare parts complexity to manageable levels. Simplified mechanical systems allowed maintenance by personnel with basic technical training. Mass production techniques reduced individual vehicle cost while increasing total output. Assembly line methods developed in automobile manufacturing translated directly to tank production, with modifications that improved rather than compromised quality control. The result was tanks with adequate individual performance that could be replaced faster than they could be destroyed and maintained by crews with minimal specialized training. The tactical implications became evident during fighting in Italy throughout spring 1944. German tank crews achieved impressive individual kill ratios, destroying Sherman tanks with efficiency that confirmed their superior training and equipment. But tactical success translated into strategic failure when destroyed. American tanks were replaced within hours, while German losses accumulated without replacement. Panzer units that had achieved local victories found themselves progressively weakened by attrition that American units could sustain indefinitely. The mathematics of replacement created conditions where German tactical excellence became strategically irrelevant. Oberst Hyacinth Graf Strachwitz, commanding a panzer regiment near Rome, documented this phenomenon in combat reports that reached Army High Command in April 1944. His unit had destroyed 43 American tanks during 6 weeks of defensive operations, while losing only 8 German vehicles. By traditional measures, this represented exceptional tactical performance that should have resulted in local air superiority. Instead, American tank strength in his sector had increased during the same period as replacement vehicles exceeded losses. His own regiment, having received no replacement tanks, had been reduced to 60% strength, despite achieving favorable casualty ratios. The tactical victory was becoming strategic defeat through simple mathematics of industrial capacity. Intelligence assessments from other theaters confirmed the pattern. In the Pacific, Japanese forces reported American tank deployments that exceeded all previous estimates. Soviet forces on the Eastern Front were receiving Lend-Lease Sherman tanks in quantities that supplemented their domestic production significantly. British forces were converting entirely from domestic tank production to American Sherman variants, indicating confidence in American manufacturing capacity that transcended national pride. The global deployment of American armor exceeded the combined tank production of all other nations participating in the war. The psychological impact on German tank crews became evident in combat reports from multiple fronts. Veterans who had dominated early war tank battles found themselves facing opponents who could absorb devastating losses and return to combat within days at full strength. The tactical doctrines that had proven successful against British, Soviet, and early American forces became counterproductive when facing opponents who could replace losses faster than they could be inflicted. German crews reported increasing stress levels as the mathematical certainty of eventual defeat became undeniable despite continued tactical success. By May 1944, German tank commanders understood that they were facing an entirely new form of warfare where individual excellence was being overwhelmed by industrial capacity. The Sherman tanks that had drawn mockery 8 months earlier were revealing their true purpose. They were not designed to match German tanks in individual combat. They were designed to outnumber German tanks by ratios that made individual superiority irrelevant. American industry had created a weapon system based on quantity rather than quality, but the quantity was so overwhelming that quality became meaningless. The preparation for the Normandy invasion demonstrated the full scope of American tank deployment. Reconnaissance flights over England revealed tank concentrations that exceeded German estimates by factors of 3 or more. The Americans were not simply replacing combat losses or maintaining existing units. They were building armoured forces on a scale that German industry could never approach, preparing for sustained offensive operations that would continue regardless of tactical setbacks or individual unit losses. The revelation of American industrial supremacy reached its crescendo on June 6, 1944, when the first Sherman tanks rolled off landing craft onto the beaches of Normandy. Hauptmann Wilhelm Richter, commanding a Panzer IV positioned in the Atlantic Wall defences, watched through his periscope as wave after wave of American armour poured onto the sand. The sight defied every calculation German planners had made about Allied invasion capabilities. Within the first 6 hours of the landing, over 200 Sherman tanks had reached French soil. By the end of D-Day, that number had doubled. By the end of the first week, German observers counted more than 800 American tanks operating in the narrow Normandy bridgehead, with additional hundreds arriving daily aboard LSTS that delivered completed vehicles directly from English staging areas to combat zones. Richter's radio crackled with reports from observation posts along the invasion front. Each transmission brought news of additional American armor concentrations that exceeded previous intelligence estimates. The Americans were not simply landing the minimum forces necessary to establish a foothold. They were deploying armored strength calculated to overwhelm German defenses through sheer numerical superiority, regardless of tactical considerations. The scale of the operation revealed industrial planning that had anticipated massive losses while ensuring sufficient reserves to continue offensive operations indefinitely. The German response demonstrated the fundamental weakness of their production philosophy when confronted with American industrial capacity. Panzer Lehr Division, considered among Germany's finest armored formations, deployed with 130 tanks to counter the American buildup. Within 2 weeks of combat, the division had been reduced to 40 operational vehicles through battle losses and mechanical failures. American tank strength in the same sector had increased during the identical period as replacement vehicles exceeded combat losses by substantial margins. The mathematics were becoming undeniable even to German commanders who had previously dismissed American industrial claims as propaganda. General der Panzertruppe Heinrich Eberbach, commanding Panzergroup West, received intelligence assessments in July 1944 that fundamentally altered German strategic planning for the defense of France. American tank production had exceeded 40,000 Shermans, with manufacturing rates continuing to accelerate rather than plateau. Quality control metrics showed improvement rather than degradation, despite the massive production volume. Mechanical reliability rates were increasing as manufacturing experience accumulated, and design modifications addressed operational issues identified through combat feedback. Most significantly, American logistics networks were demonstrating capability to maintain multiple armored divisions at full operational strength, while simultaneously building strategic reserves for future operations. The implications extended beyond simple numerical comparisons into fundamental questions about the nature of modern warfare itself. German doctrine emphasized the decisive battle, the concentrated application of superior forces at critical points to achieve tactical breakthrough that would produce strategic victory. This philosophy required tanks with exceptional individual performance, crews with superior training, and tactical methods that maximize the effectiveness of limited resources. American doctrine appeared to embrace attrition warfare, accepting tactical losses in exchange for strategic advantages gained through industrial supremacy that could sustain operations indefinitely. The contrast became visible during the Battle of Villers-Bocage on June 13, 1944, when SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann's Tiger I tank achieved one of the most spectacular individual victories in armored warfare history. Wittmann's crew destroyed 25 Allied vehicles, including multiple Sherman tanks, in a single engagement lasting less than 15 minutes. The tactical performance demonstrated everything German tank doctrine promised about individual superiority, crew training, and technological advancement applied to combat situations. German propaganda celebrated the victory as proof that quality would always triumph over quantity, that superior German engineering could overcome any numerical disadvantage through tactical excellence. But the strategic reality told a different story. Within 48 hours of Wittmann's spectacular success, the British 22nd Armoured Brigade had been reinforced with replacement Shermans that exceeded the total number of vehicles destroyed in the engagement. The American 2nd Armoured Division deployed additional tank battalions to the sector, bringing total Allied armour strength to levels higher than before Wittmann's attack. German reinforcements consisted of individual replacement vehicles transferred from other sectors that were already below authorized strength. The tactical victory had achieved no strategic advantage while revealing German inability to sustain the loss rates that such victories required. Intelligence reports from multiple fronts confirmed that Wittmann's experience represented the broader pattern of German-American tank warfare. Individual German crews continued achieving impressive tactical successes, destroying American tanks at ratios that should have provided decisive advantages. But strategic outcomes consistently favored American forces because replacement rates exceeded loss rates by margins that made tactical excellence strategically irrelevant. German panzer divisions were being reduced through attrition that American armored formations could sustain indefinitely without degradation in operational capability. The full scope of American tank deployment became evident during Operation Cobra, the breakout from the Normandy beachhead in late July 1944. American forces concentrated more than 1,500 Sherman tanks for the offensive, creating armored density that exceeded German calculations about logistically sustainable force deployment. The concentration represented more tanks than Germany possessed on the entire Western Front, yet intelligence assessments indicated that these vehicles represented only a fraction of American armored strength available in the European theatre. Additional thousands remained in reserve positions across England, while production continued delivering new vehicles at rates exceeding combat losses across all theatres simultaneously. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, recalled to service as Inspector General of Panzer Troops, toured the Normandy front in August 1944 and submitted reports that fundamentally challenged German strategic assumptions about armoured warfare. American tank tactics had evolved from the crude employment methods observed during early engagements to sophisticated combined arms operations that integrated armour, infantry, artillery, and air support with effectiveness that approached German standards. More significantly, American crews demonstrated tactical competence that improved with each engagement while maintaining unit strength through replacement personnel who arrived with training standards equal to veterans lost in combat. The evolution of Sherman tank variants revealed American industrial flexibility that German production methods could not match. The original M4 Sherman had been modified continuously based on combat experience, producing specialized versions optimized for specific tactical requirements. The M4A1 featured improved transmission systems based on field reports about mechanical reliability. The M4A3 incorporated upgraded engines that addressed power limitations identified during combat operations. The M4A3E8, designated Easy 8 by crews, mounted improved suspension systems and higher velocity guns that substantially enhanced battlefield performance compared to early production models. Each variant demonstrated American ability to incorporate battlefield lessons into production modifications without disrupting manufacturing schedules or reducing output volumes. German tank production, constrained by precision manufacturing requirements and limited production capacity, could not implement similar modifications without substantial delays and cost increases that reduced total output. American factories were improving Sherman performance while simultaneously increasing production rates, achieving technological advancement through industrial methods that German manufacturers could not replicate. The psychological impact on German tank crews became evident in combat reports and prisoner interrogations throughout the Normandy campaign. Veterans who had dominated early war tank battles found themselves facing opponents who could absorb devastating losses and return to combat within hours at full strength, with crews demonstrating competence equal to the veterans they replaced. The tactical doctrines that had proven successful against limited opposition became counterproductive when facing opponents who could sustain losses indefinitely while maintaining operational tempo that prevented German forces from recovering between engagements. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding a panzer regiment during the defense of Caen, documented the transformation in German crew morale as the mathematical reality of American industrial superiority became undeniable. His veterans understood that achieving favorable casualty ratios was becoming strategically meaningless when American replacement rates exceeded German production capacity by orders of magnitude. The knowledge that tactical excellence could no longer produce strategic victory created psychological pressure that affected combat performance even among the most experienced crews. By September 1944, German tank commanders understood that they were confronting an entirely new form of warfare where traditional concepts of tactical superiority had been rendered obsolete by industrial capacity that exceeded all historical precedents. The Sherman tanks that had drawn mockery 12 months earlier were revealing their true strategic purpose. They were not designed to match German tanks in individual combat excellence. They were designed to overwhelm German armoured forces through numerical superiority so complete that individual performance became irrelevant to strategic outcomes. The preparation for Operation Market Garden demonstrated the scope of American tank deployment capabilities when concentrated for specific objectives. Intelligence assessments indicated that American forces could deploy more than 2,000 Sherman tanks for the operation, while maintaining full-strength armored divisions across other sectors of the Western Front simultaneously. The concentration exceeded the total German tank inventory for the entire theater, while representing only a fraction of American armored strength available globally across multiple theaters of operation. German defensive planning for Market Garden revealed the complete transformation in strategic thinking that American industrial supremacy had forced upon Wehrmacht commanders. Traditional defensive doctrine emphasized concentrated counterattacks using superior German tanks to achieve decisive tactical victories that would disrupt enemy offensive operations. The new reality required defensive methods designed to inflict maximum casualties while accepting inevitable tactical defeat, hoping to delay American advances through attrition that American industrial capacity could sustain indefinitely, but German forces could not. The Sherman tank that Obergefreiter Klaus Brenner had mocked on that October morning in 1943 had achieved something no German engineer could have anticipated. It had transformed the fundamental nature of armored warfare from a contest of individual excellence into a demonstration of industrial supremacy. The laughter that crackled through German radio networks as those first squat American tanks rolled toward Anzio had long since died away, replaced by the grim recognition that quantity possessed a quality all its own when deployed in sufficient numbers. By war's end, American factories had produced over 49,000 Sherman tanks, a number that exceeded the combined tank production of every other nation in the conflict. These were not the crude machines that German crews had dismissed as moving barns painted green. They were refined weapon systems that had evolved through continuous improvement while maintaining production rates that defied comprehension. The industrial philosophy that German engineers had rejected as barbaric had proven more effective than precision manufacturing constrained by limited capacity. The Sherman's ultimate victory lay not in superior armor or more powerful guns, but in the simple mathematical reality that American industry could replace losses faster than German forces could inflict them. When tactical excellence met industrial supremacy, the factories won. The mockery had turned to silence, then to fear, then to the inevitable recognition that the war's outcome had been written not on battlefields, but in production statistics that told the story of America's mechanical avalanche burying German resistance under weight of numbers that no amount of individual courage could overcome.